evening and welcome to our DEQ 101 webinar. My name is Danielle Sims. I'm the Environmental Justice Program Manager here at Virginia's DEQ. Virginia DEQ Central Office. I'll go ahead and introduce all the staff here with us tonight. We have Gwen McCrae, who's the Environmental Justice Coordinator for the Northern Region. She'll be helping with a lot of the work behind the scenes with answering our questions. And Kate Miller, our Environmental Justice Coordinator in Blue Ridge, Southwest and Valley, will be our presenter tonight. And Kevin Vaughn, our DEQ's Training Manager, you heard a few minutes ago, he'll be moderating tonight's webinar. And lastly, Melanie Davenport, our Division Director of Cross Media Programs, will be answering questions we received tonight. So one of our office's initiatives this year has been to share more information with the public about DEQ programs and resources to increase transparency of what the agency does. You can visit deq.virginia.gov/edu series to learn more about our future webinars this year. And whether you're here with us live or watching us as a recording, thank you for taking the time out of your day to learn more about DEQ and what we do here. Now, without further ado, I'll pass it over to Gwen McCrae to walk through the GoToWebinar controls.
Okay, great. Thank you, Danielle. I'm going to just show you a few things about how to use the platform GoToWebinar that we are using this evening to help you kind of get oriented to it so that you can interact with us and we can interact with you. So you will see over at one side of your screen is the control panel. There's a little orange arrow that you'll be able to click to open and close that control panel. At the top, you'll find a mute button. And just below that, depending on the version of GoToWebinar that you have, you may see also a raise hand button. Don't worry too much about those. We may need to use them, but we have lots of other ways to do to interact with you and to answer your questions. So if you don't have a raise hand button, don't worry too much about it. Down below, if you go about halfway down in the control panel there is there's a line that says handouts. And if you click on the little arrow next to that, it will open up the handout that we have for you this evening, which is called DEQ 101 Webinar Fact Sheet, and you can download that. You can look at that now. You can download it for later. We will also be including it when we send out a follow-up email later on later on this week after the webinar has completed. Below that is a line for the questions box. In the questions bar, that's where you can type in questions that you have for us and for our subject matter expert tonight, Melanie Davenport. So feel free to type those questions into the question bar throughout the webinar. We are going to take pauses at various times through the webinar to be able to answer those questions. So we won't necessarily need to hold them all to the end, so go ahead and type in your questions as they occur to you. If you have some questions that we are not able to get to during our questions breaks, we will be following up with you individually via email to answer your questions. And just one other point, if you have questions about a specific permit or a specific project, we probably won't be able to answer those questions this evening, but again, we will follow up with you individually to answer those questions via email. And finally, below the questions, there's also a chat bar. And if you open up the chat bar, you can use that chat box to, that will communicate with everyone who is online. So if you go open up the chat bar, and then in the to section, you can make sure that it says to the entire audience. And we are going to check that out. We're going to try that out now to see that you can find it. So Kate, if you could go to the next slide. So we are going to do our first poll question. We'll have a couple of these throughout the evening. If you could find that webinar chat box, open it up and send your chat to the entire audience and tell us the answer to your question. What do you think DEQ does or is responsible for doing?
Excellent, Gwen. That's a good question. That's a big question, isn't it, folks? So what do you think DEQ does or is responsible for doing? Let's go ahead and open up that chat and go ahead and put in your response here to us. And we're getting some responses coming in. Thank you very much for putting in your responses. You know, the more you interact with us, the more engaging it's going to be, the more interesting it'll be for you and for us, actually. So it's got like a big job protecting the environment, there was a question about the tire amnesty program, protecting the environment. The chat box and the question box is actually combined, Gwen. So if you can't find questions, chat, you're actually in the right spot, Martha. Ensuring appropriate environmental quality. Excellent responses here, folks. The quality of our water, administering grant funding. Excellent. Protecting wildlife. Interesting. Okay. Compliance. There's a big one. Enforcing environmental regulations. Excellent responses here, folks. Yeah, so there seems to be a fairly good understanding, wouldn't you say, Gwen?
Yeah, that's great. That is an excellent selection of answers there. And thank you for clarifying. The chat box and the question box are the same. So go ahead and you can put your responses into that question box. And I think we are ready to if there are any other answers, go ahead and continue to put them in. But I think we might be ready to move on to Kate's presentation.
Excellent. And I will just a point of clarification. No, this is not like a streaming chat. You won't see other people's responses. It's only yours here. However, if we answer questions individually, you can see if we reply to all on that. But it's not a streaming chat. You shouldn't see other people's questions. So great questions. And we also had definitely enforcement of regulations there. So over to you, Kate.
All right, great. Thank you all so much for those great answers. And with that, we'll jump right into the webinar. So here are the objectives for today's DEQ 101 webinar. After the presentation concludes, we hope everyone participating will be able to identify the DEQ office responsible for the region where you live, DEQ's mission and vision, the different types of air, water, and land permits that DEQ is involved in, those DEQ activities that protect air quality, water quality, and land resources, the goal of DEQ's compliance and enforcement functions, and also be able to think of several ways that you can get involved with DEQ. DEQ is one of the 5 agencies overseen by the Virginia Secretary of Natural and Historic Resources, which is charged with protecting and restoring the Commonwealth's natural and historic resources. The Secretary's office advises the governor on how natural resource issues and works to advance the governor's top environmental priorities. On this slide, you can see there are other state agencies that also fall under the purview of the Secretary of Natural and Historic Resources on the left, as well as some of our sister agencies, which are listed on the right. So who we are. DEQ has a vision for the Commonwealth's environment, that Virginians will enjoy cleaner water available for all uses, improved air quality that supports communities and ecosystems, and productive reuse of contaminated land. With a staff of more than 800 professionals, we apply science and law to enhance Virginia's environment through programs that focus on air quality, renewable energy, water planning and permitting, land protection and revitalization, as well as cross-media programs. DEQ has 7 offices throughout the Commonwealth in a variety of locations. Our Blue Ridge office is in Salem. You can see that here in green. The central office is in Richmond. Northern Virginia office is in Woodbridge. That's featured in orange here. The Piedmont office is in Glen Allen. You can see that in yellow. The Southwest office is in Abingdon. That's shown in pink. The Tidewater Regional office is in blue. And the Valley Regional office is based out of Harrisonburg, and that is shown in purple. Throughout the years, many interns also join our DEQ staff at these locations. So DEQ's mission is to protect and enhance the environment of Virginia in order to promote the health and well-being of the Commonwealth citizens, residents, and visitors in accordance with applicable laws and regulations. DEQ's vision is that all Virginians will enjoy cleaner water, better air quality, and the productive reuse of land that was once contaminated. So DEQ's mission and vision in action. So these outline what you should expect from DEQ. So how does DEQ actualize this though? First, there's the DEQ 101 program, which focuses on building regional collaboration to increase efficiency. One DEQ promotes staff crossing regional borders and working with other DEQ offices in the Commonwealth to ensure permit reviews stay on schedule. It also ensures agency communications are consistent. They're one DEQ. We're unifying our communications across the board so that when you see a presentation, a social media post, or anything else, any other form of outreach from us, you'll be able to recognize it as coming from the DEQ. Additionally, there's the Virginia Permit Transparency, or VPT platform. The VPT is a centralized platform that the public can use to track the status and timeline of critical steps in the Commonwealth's permitting process. DEQ permits and permit applications, as well as those of Virginia Energy and the Virginia Marine Resources Commission, can all be searched and filtered on this state site. DEQ's Permitting Enhancement and Evaluation Platform, otherwise known as PEEP, also brings more transparency to DEQ's permitting process by providing current information about essential steps and permitting schedules needed for approval. Applicants, agents, the public, and DEQ staff can all use PEEP to track and manage permitting and approval processes. And we also have the My DEQ portal. This is DEQ's comprehensive online reporting and records access tool that's available to the public. Unregistered users of My DEQ portal can view the status of permit applications, report pollution and search for pollution reports, and get access to enforcement records. Those who are registered by My DEQ portal, they can actually go a step further and they can apply for and report on litter grant awards, apply and register permits for various water programs, and register, view, and update underground storage tank facility and owner information. So one example of how you can use the My DEQ portal is to report a pollution incident. DEQ's Pollution Response Program, otherwise known as PREP, responds to pollution incidents that may impact air, land, and water resources in order to protect human health and the environment. The public and regulated entities may report pollution incidents by submitting an online report through the My DEQ portal or by contacting one of the regional offices directly. Though if you do observe a significant pollution incident that presents an imminent threat to human life or environment, please do call 911 first. All right, and this brings us to our first break for questions. So let's see, Gwen, have we received any questions at this point?
We do have a few questions. Melanie, are you ready to answer a couple questions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Except, can you hold on one sec? I have to just apologize to all of the participants. I'm doing this at home, and as unprofessional as it is, I have a very large dog who won't leave my side. I have on a headphone. Hopefully, if there's dog barking in the background, I apologize.
Thank you, Melanie. Okay, so our first question comes from C. Newton, and the question is, how will DEQ enforce the reporting requirements for poultry waste end users for the fiscal year that ended June 30th, 2024?
How will we enforce? Well, so that's a pretty specific programmatic question. We are using an online reporting system, I think, but let's just say if I'm not 100% certain on the status of that reporting system to DEQ, if the electronic's not available, then data has to be submitted on paper. And we have our staff that manage that particular Virginia pollution abatement permit. It's the poultry general permit and then the end user requirements. And we will check to see if users are in fact submitting that information. Either we get it on paper or we get it electronically. A lot of times our first step is what's called compliance assistance, which means we will contact folks covered by our regulations, covered by reporting requirements, and actually speak to them and say, hey, you're required to submit this. And then we help them if they need assistance in understanding what has to be submitted, where it has to be submitted. There are some very, very low penalties that the General Assembly set forth for end users who don't report. I know in past years, if compliance assistance has not been effective, if we've had to issue a notice of violation and then move towards an enforcement action, we will do that. But again, the General Assembly has capped our authority in that particular program area. So we check to make sure it's submitted. If it's not, we work with them to get it submitted. And then ultimately, if an end user fails to submit, we will send them a notice of violation and move to an enforcement action.
Okay, great, thank you. So we do have several more questions. Some of them do get a little bit specific. So if there are any that are, that require maybe more specificity than we have time to get into tonight, feel free, Melanie, to let us know, and we can, give them an initial answer, and then we can follow up with more detail later.
And alternative, and additionally to that, I mean, this is a DEQ 101 overview. And I have been at this agency a long time, but unfortunately, there's so many regulations and so many permits that we administer that a lot of times I would actually have to go look up a specific answer. So if that's the case, I'll be happy to say that, and then we can respond tomorrow.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, so our next question. In the past, DEQ had a tire amnesty program. Is something like that still available, specifically for rural Virginia, Bedford County businesses, or illegal dump sites?
So we had a tire fund where we would actually go in and clean up tire piles. I believe that there have been issues in the past with capitalizing that fund, but again, I would have to reach out to our folks in the land division to get the specifics of how that is currently being funded and administered.
Okay, thank you. So our next question, is the Litter Fund Advisory Board still around?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
But again, I can certainly look it up tomorrow or this evening, and we will get back to you with an answer.
Yes, so we do have a plan to respond to individuals who have questions that didn't get answered. We will follow up with those via email. Okay, so I do have still a few more questions, and I also see that there are some folks who have raised their hands. If you have your hand raised, if you could write your question into the question box, that will be the easiest way for us to address it. So our next question, this is two parts. If you report an incident, should you report to DEQ and a local entity? And part two, can we see the dog?
Oh my gosh, let me answer the first question. And if you can't see him, he's actually laying right next to me. He's a 130-pound beast. So there is an overlap. Here you go. Here he is, right here. Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. There is an overlap. There he is. In responsibility. And there's a whole network that manages responses once we do get information submitted. So if it is a pollution incident, the best thing to do is to come in through our prep portal or call the regional prep line, because that gets it into the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, and it alerts a whole system, and it's the folks who are best suited and trained to respond. Now, a lot of times, DEQ's role is involved in investigating an incident, and then we'll use the folks from emergency management. But if we need to, of course, we will bring in local fire folks. Some larger counties actually have folks that specialize in hazardous waste and hazardous materials. But reports that come in through our prep portal are distributed electronically to all the entities that need to be involved in the response.
Great. Thank you very much. And I have also put into the chat a link to the prep reporting page and some information about what to do if it's an emergency versus a non-emergency. So we have, it looks like a few more questions still in this section. The next question, how does DEQ handle oil contamination in fresh water?
So Article 11 of the State Water Control Law is sort of the framework for handling oil incidences. So in that section, there is both established an oil pollution fund and also responsibility to someone or some entity who has caused or discharged that oil. So our first response is always going to be to contain, to remediate, to eliminate the environmental impact. A lot of times, though, those responses require a lot of equipment and technical expertise that we don't have, but through the use of the fund, we'll hire a third-party contractor. We generally, if for example, there was a specific incident that caused the release, we will go to them first and say, hey, these are the things you have to do. You have to hire a contractor. These are the steps you have to take. And then if they can't or won't, we will use our access to the fund to hire a third party to go and do it for us. And then we'll bring a cost recovery action back against the responsible party. Now, I will tell you this, sometimes folks get, we don't typically respond to pollution complaints on, really small farm ponds, that's exclusively on someone's property, because we only have so many resources to dedicate for the pollution response. But if it is in state waters, we will definitely engage either with the responsible party for a response, or we'll hire a third-party contractor if we need to.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Melanie. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question. We do have a lot of questions actually that are people are coming. Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much for putting so many great questions in the chat. So I'm going to do one more question now, and then we'll move on with our presentation, but we will come back to as many questions as we can get to.
Great.
So the next question is kind of a question about approaches for folks who see that there are some environmental issues that need some attention. So specifically, we're talking about what could be done to get the illegal tire dumping under control. So what does that mean? Do we need to lobby for stricter laws? Do we need to try to get a bigger budget so that there can be more inspectors? What are, kind of who and also who's responsible for something like illegal tire dumping?
So, one of the, well, let me start by saying that I have actually heard presentations in the past of companies and resources where folks can actually put up cameras to capture, and not just tires, but illegal dumping activity, illegal disposal activity. That typically works, and that's not a program that DEQ to this date has been able to fund, but it's something that a locality might be able to do. But if there are places in your locality, in your town, in your city that you see are becoming sort of favorite dump sites, I think putting up cameras, they're sort of like deer cameras. They capture movement, they turn on when something's there. I guess you could even angle them to capture license plates and things like that. The challenge, though, are those sort of one-off places where it happens and you didn't have any sort of advance warning to know it was going to happen there. And that's where, how do you have the foresight to know that might happen? We do have everybody, you may know this, there is a tax put on every tire that's sold. There is sort of an infrastructure to try and collect those used tires. One of the things that we have struggled with for a very long time is to try and figure out how to promote end users what can you do with these tires? A lot of times I've been in a number of meetings where folks have talked about burning them, turning them into fuel, chipping them, and using them in road beds and adding them to aggregate. But I think that it's really hard to get those markets up off the ground, because I've heard of several over the years, folks who have thought about trying to figure out how to reuse them, and it just never seems to work. So it is a challenge. We have seen that there have been, we've run across more tire piles recently, and it is a real challenge because, again, if it's going to one-off places, there's no way to predict where it's going to go, so there's no way to capture any information about the responsible party.
All right, Melanie, thank you so much for that answer. We are going to, as I said, there's lots of questions in the chat, but we do want to continue on with our program now. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Kate to continue the program. When we stop again, as we have time, we will come back and answer these questions in the webinar. Any questions that we don't get to in the webinar, we will follow up individually and answer via email. So Kate, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Great. All right. Thank you so much for all those questions. That was really fantastic. And we have another chance for participation here as we go to the next slide. And so this is poll question number 2. So as we wrap up our first Q&A pause, we're rolling right into the next poll question, and we ask you to use the chat box in the GoToWebinar toolbar and let us know what kind of programs do you think DEQ has. We just discussed DEQ's purpose and goals in a very broad sense. So what kind of programs do you think that DEQ staff are involved in that work towards the agency's mission and vision?
All right, folks, this is your opportunity to take a stab at what programs you think we have. We've stumped them, Kate. Don't know. We've got nothing. There we go. Okay, coastal zone management. That's a good one. Water quality, here we go. Getting some responses now. Water quality testing, yep. What other programs do you think we have, folks? We heard about pollution response, freshwater wetlands, coordinating volunteer activities, air, water, waste protections, Chesapeake Bay, another one for coastal zone management, litter and recycling grants, stormwater management, there's a big one, water cleanup, education on environmental issues, resiliency, I hope, landfill, education on landfills, surface water investigations and air quality, some really good ones there. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Well, you guys definitely hit the nail on the head there with several of these programs. So DEQ is very thorough. Our agency programs are pretty diverse, and they include monitoring and inspections, as well as planning, outreach, permitting, compliance, enforcement, waste reduction, pollution response, grants and loans and other forms of funding, outreach, as well as training and certifications. And we'll be going into more detail on several of these programs and activities in the upcoming slides. So DEQ as an agency is structured by both media and cross-media divisions. And by media, we're referring to DEQ's division of air, land, and water. The functions within our media programs include, as we mentioned on the previous slide, monitoring, modeling, permitting, compliance, planning and cleanup. And these functions are all interrelated, and they also inform one another. For example, if DEQ staff is working towards developing a plan to improve air quality, they'll need to get data that can be collected from monitoring efforts, which is then used in modeling to see how air quality improvement goals of the plan can be attained. And DEQ also includes cross-media divisions, such as pollution response, policy, coastal zone management, I know when you got that in the previous poll, enforcement, environmental impact reviews, community engagement and education, that was another one you all picked up on, funding and grants. As indicated by the name, these cross-media division programs apply to air, water, and land resources. So basically all the media that we cover. So what is a permit? If you've ever gone through, that's kind of what people think of when they think of DEQ sometimes, they think of permitting. So if you've ever gone through a major home renovation, for example, chances are that you had to get a permit pulled so that the contractor could work on your home. In the context of DEQ, a permit is a legally enforceable document. It's designed to limit pollution in order to protect our air, land, and water. Fundamentally, permits are developed to protect human health and the environment. DEQ issues many different types of permits. We have just a few of those different types of permits DEQ is involved in listed on this slide, broken down by media type. Air permits, those put conditions on facilities that will create air emissions. Water permits, these address water withdrawals, wastewater and stormwater discharges, as well as impacts to streams and wetlands. And land permits, these address facilities that will manage waste. Depending upon the situation or scenario, a facility may need to obtain multiple permits from DEQ in order to operate. For example, a landfill project may require a solid waste permit that allows for the construction and operation of a solid waste management facility that will dispose, treat, and store solid waste. And that same facility may also be required to have other permits that address water and air emissions. There are several ways that DEQ ensures compliance with environmental laws, regulations, and permits, including both on-site and off-site monitoring. For on-site compliance monitoring, DEQ staff perform regular inspections, noting any problems observed in a written inspection report, along with a deadline to correct the issues. Samples and photos may also be taken during the inspection. For off-site compliance monitoring, DEQ staff reviews reports that facilities are required to submit on a regular basis and can also monitor data collection. In just a bit, we'll provide you with some more examples of how DEQ monitors compliance in greater detail. The core responsibilities of DEQ's Air and Renewable Energy Division focus on vehicle emissions, also known as air check. This program was established in 1982 as an important part of Northern Virginia's air quality plan, with vehicle emissions identified as the largest single source of toxic and smog-forming air pollution in Northern Virginia, as well as in most of the country. The goal of the emissions inspection program is to ensure that vehicles operate as cleanly as possible. We also have programs that include greenhouse gases. Virginia is committed to addressing greenhouse gases. Those are the gases that trap heat in the atmosphere. DEQ has conducted economy-wide greenhouse gas inventories that are available on the agency's website. And on July 22nd, DEQ also received 2 climate pollution reduction planning grants, CPRG. These came from the United States Environmental Protection Agency and were funded through the Inflation Reduction Act. The grants will provide almost $150 million to DEQ and more than $197 million total for the state of Virginia for greenhouse gas reduction initiatives to be implemented throughout the Commonwealth. Renewable energy. As part of DEQ's effort to ensure access to clean air and renewable energy, the agency also issues permits for renewable energy projects with a generating capacity of between 5 and 150 megawatts. For air quality and monitoring assessments, this includes air quality and forecasting, air monitoring, air assessments, and air quality planning. As a quick reminder, DEQ only handles ambient or outdoor air quality. Indoor air quality, specifically air quality related to mold, mildew, radon, sewer gas, those are actually overseen by the Virginia Department of Health. So DEQ's Air Division aims to manage present and future sources of air pollution. They ensure the safety and quality of Virginia air by monitoring and analyzing air quality data, regulating sources of air pollution, and working with local, state, and federal agencies to plan and implement strategies. Here we can see in the boxes on the left side of the slide, we have air assessments and permits. Modeling is performed by DEQ as well as by regional planning organizations in the air permitting process and for regulatory or policy assessment. Air quality monitoring. DEQ monitors air pollution at dozens of locations throughout the state. The specific criteria pollutants DEQ monitors include carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, lead, and particulate matter. In addition to these criteria pollutants, DEQ also monitors toxic air pollutants as well. Now we'll move on to air quality forecasting. As mentioned, DEQ monitors air quality in the Commonwealth, and it also provides a free daily air quality forecast and health alert that's available via email. These forecasts provide the current estimated air quality index, AQI, air quality index, which is color coded. It ranges from green, indicating good air quality on the day, or it can go down to a maroon purple color that indicates hazardous air quality that day. And that link will be added to the chat so you can use it if you want to subscribe to receive these air quality forecasts for anyone who's interested. And for those wanting to learn more about air quality in the Commonwealth, DEQ did do a webinar in July on ambient air quality. And the webinar covered the basics of air quality laws, as well as regulations, outdoor air quality standards, and air quality monitoring. It also touched on the air quality index that we just discussed and other tools that you can use to stay informed about air quality and how to take action to protect your health. The link to the webinar recording is available on DEQ's Education Series webpage and will also be dropped in the chat. For air quality planning, in recent years, air quality in Virginia has actually improved. This is in large part due to DEQ's measuring, modeling, and controlling sources of air pollution from sources such as factories and individual cars. To limit how much of certain pollutants can be emitted, DEQ manages pollutant emissions inventory program and monitors air pollution, as mentioned earlier. To ensure air quality continues to improve, DEQ coordinates air quality and transportation planning services, air permit and emission fees, and provides technical support to ensure that plans are attainable. Based on DEQ's monitoring data and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency designates attainment areas and non-attainment areas in Virginia. Attainment areas meet the federal air quality standards, but some are required to adhere to EPA-approved maintenance plans and work continuously to keep pollution below that standard. Non-attainment areas have air pollution levels that exceed the federal standard of air quality. When this occurs, DEQ has to submit a state implementation plan to the EPA outlining programs to improve that air quality. Virginia has a state implementation plan which includes special programs aimed at reducing air emissions. Non-attainment areas in Virginia include Northern Virginia, which is a non-attainment for ozone, and in Giles County, in the Blue Ridge area, which is non-attainment for sulfur dioxide. And this brings us to our next break for questions. So Gwen, have any questions come up about air so far?
We do have a few air questions, yes. Melanie, are you ready?
I will do my best, yes.
All right. Okay, and then if we have time, we have a few questions that we can go back to from the previous section as well. So the first question, are there any required DEQ permits for a food scrap composting facility?
For an industrial / commercial or somebody's backyard composting pile?
Let's go with an industrial commercial facility.
I don't know the answer to that. I know there are not requirements for someone's composting in their backyard. That's one of those we're going to have to look in the regulations and answer tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. And then another question, which refers back to the past couple slides where we were talking about vehicle emissions and the non-attainment area. Why are there vehicle emissions limitations only for Northern Virginia?
Because we have the framework for how we know we've got good air quality is something called NAAQS, which is National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And there's about 6 different parameters, and that's what we monitor for on a regular basis. And in Northern Virginia is our only area that is in NOx non-attainment. So the better the air quality, the less things we have to regulate. But up in Northern Virginia, there is, because the air quality doesn't meet those national standards, we implemented the Air Check Virginia program. Because really there's a huge amount of nitrous oxide emissions that come from motor vehicles. I think a lot of folks kind of think that air quality is affected by power plants and manufacturing facilities, but there is a huge amount of tailpipe emissions that impact air quality. And fortunately, in Virginia, other parts of the state are in attainment, so we don't have to have the air check program there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So if anyone else has questions about air or general DEQ activities, please go ahead and put those into the chat. But because we still have a couple minutes, I'm going to go back to our previous section because we had a few questions we weren't able to answer then. So we're going back to water. This is right in Melanie's wheelhouse. This is a question from a Virginia master naturalist who is a Save Our Streams monitor. She says that when I first became a monitor, my river was very healthy. Then DEQ raised the allowable level of fecal content in the river, and the score for my river went down. Why basically, like, what was the change? Why would they allow a higher amount in the water?
So our water quality standards, similar to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, is we look at our standards every 3 years in something called triennial review. And what we do is we look at what technical information EPA has developed in those intervening 3 years, and we take a look at what our water quality standards, how they're set, how they're measured. And the idea is that we have to bring the Virginia standards basically into line with how the feds have proposed changes to their water quality standards. With the fecal number, it has always been my understanding that it was a change in a method of calculation rather than relaxing the water quality standard and the amount of fecal coliform or the amount of bacteria that is in our state waters. There was a lot of discussion about sort of the statistical analysis, and I have to admit that folks in our water quality standards program who are much more adept at math and statistics and all of that took a look at this, and this is what happens a lot of times. EPA changes, improves sort of the monitoring and the measuring for water quality standards, and it's all based on evolving science and technology. I think that though, bacteria aside, I think it is fair to reflect that we are seeing a lot more algae outbreaks throughout the state, some of which might be the harmful algal blooms, some might be more nuisance algae, and there is a lot of scientific thought that that's happening because of increased in-stream temperatures. You know, for algae to grow, they need certain temperatures, they need food, they need, you know, nutrients, but a lot of folks think that it is the rising temperatures that is causing some impacts to water quality.
All right, Melanie, thank you so much. We do have one more question, and this may actually be a question that Melanie's going to want to kick back to our team, but I'll let her decide that. What kinds of programs are available to residents through DEQ, such as household chemical collections or kids programming, things like that?
I am thrilled to let you take that one, Gwen, if you'd like. That would be great.
All right. As far as I know, household chemical collections, those are usually organized by localities, by facilities that are in localities, and so that would be, you know, a local landfill site that is able to handle those kinds of materials. So those are going to be a local issue. We do have a program of water quality monitoring, our citizen water quality monitoring program, which is a volunteer water quality monitoring. And so there are various groups throughout the state that participate in water quality monitoring. And sometimes that can be a group of kids who are just learning about science, and they can participate in water quality monitoring and submit their data to DEQ, and that can help DEQ make some, use that data for education purposes, or sometimes identify water bodies that require more attention from our water quality monitoring staff, all the way up to organizations that have lots of quality controls and processes in place for collecting data in a way that has a kind of high quality of scientific accuracy, so that we can actually use it in our calculations. So I would say that the water quality monitoring volunteer program is a really big one. The other thing that the Office of Environmental Justice and our communications office and many of our other staff as well, we do a lot of outreach at different community events. And so sometimes you can find us we were at the State Fair last year, for example. So you can find us in these community outreach, in community events. We will, at the end of our program, be talking a little bit about some additional opportunities for participation. So our coastal zone management program, for example, which is housed in DEQ, is holding an ocean planning forum because they are working on a Virginia ocean plan and they are looking for input. Kate mentioned our climate pollution reduction grants, which are also like it's a large pot of money that DEQ has to help to reduce climate pollution. Those are going to also have a lot of opportunities for input from residents. So we do have a lot of programs like that and opportunities to participate. And we would be happy to, if you have something specific in mind, if you have a group in mind, our team is always happy to come out and talk to organizations and groups as well. So I will leave it at that unless Danielle has something else to add.
If I could just add one thing. Their DEQ, well, one of the slides that Kate talked about were the other agencies within the Secretariat. And what's happened over years is that some programs and areas of activity that were kind of scattered among those different agencies have been consolidated over time. And there was a point in time when DEQ had an Office of Environmental Education, and that was moved and consolidated into the Department of Conservation and Recreation, which is a sister agency. And those folks really are primarily involved in environmental education, probably more K through 8th grade, but they have tools, they have resources, and Gwen, I know they have a web page, so if we could share that link, but that's specific to environmental education.
All right, great. So thank you so much, Melanie. Let's go ahead. I know we've got a few more questions in here, but I think we have a lot to get through. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kate and we will come back to as many of these questions as we can.
All right, great. Well, thank you all for those very thoughtful questions again. And actually, a lot of you were talking about water, and that is the next media we're going to get into here. So DEQ, our water programs, we have them that focus on water quality, water quantity, stormwater, the Chesapeake Bay, wastewater, land application and beneficial reuse, clean water financing, and also wetlands and streams. Similar to air quality, we just want to point out that there is a lot of overlap between DEQ and the Virginia Department of Health with regards to protecting water quality. While DEQ maintains water quality at drinking water intakes and water quality at wastewater treatment outfalls, the Office of Drinking Water, which is at the Virginia Department of Health, regulates and oversees drinking water quality. The Office of Environmental Health Services at VDH also covers private wells, beach monitoring, and harmful algae blooms, or HABs. DEQ is responsible for administering state laws and regulations to improve and protect Virginia's streams, rivers, bays, wetlands, and groundwater for aquatic life, human health, and other beneficial water uses. DEQ works with citizens, businesses, local governments, and other state and federal agencies to plan and implement strategies and programs aimed at protecting Virginia's water resources. When reviewing permits, DEQ takes into account physical, chemical, and biological standards for water quality. Sustainability and availability are addressed through regulations and cover water use, water withdrawals, and water conservation. For those interested in taking a deeper dive on this topic of water quality, DEQ hosted a water quality monitoring and protection webinar back in April. The webinar covered the basics of clean water laws and regulations, as well as water quality standards, water quality monitoring, and how we can all work together to improve and protect Virginia's waters. The link to the webinar recording is also available on DEQ's Education Series webpage and will be dropped in the chat. So in Virginia, there's over 2,000 water quality monitoring sites that are sampled either by citizen monitors or outside agency groups according to DEQ's draft 2024 integrated report. Water quality is determined with a number of measurements that include dissolved oxygen content, pH, nutrient pollution, and other standards. Information on water quality monitoring stations is used to prioritize restoration activities, and it also helps determine the Virginia Department of Health advisories for fishing and recreation. So now we'll jump into water quality planning. Even with Virginia's bounty of water resources, we're talking more than 100,000 miles of streams and rivers, 248 publicly owned lakes, over 1 million acres of freshwater and coastal wetlands, and 120 miles of Atlantic Ocean coastline. DEQ has to actively manage the Commonwealth's water resources to meet the demands of a diverse and dynamic state. Through water supply planning and the analysis of surface water and groundwater, DEQ strives to equitably and sustainably manage these water resources. Working closely with state and local stakeholders, we developed the State Water Resources Plan, which is published every 5 years, and it includes a cumulative impact analysis modeling of surface water and groundwater resources. We also manage the water supply planning program, the goal of which is to ensure adequate and safe drinking water is available to all Virginians while encouraging, promoting, and protecting aquatic life, recreation, and other beneficial uses. DEQ data monitoring and analysis also contributes to drought determinations from the Virginia Drought Monitoring Task Force, which some of you may have seen this summer. As of the 16th of August, several drought advisories have been lifted as a result of rain from the remnants of Tropical Storm Debbie. However, there is still a drought warning that's in effect for the Shenandoah region, the northwestern part of the state, and a drought watch remains in place for the Big Sandy region in southwestern Virginia. This slide shows just a few of the water programs that DEQ manages. Wastewater, which is the used water supply of a community, coming from things like baths and showers, sinks and dishwashers, washing machines, toilets, and those can be located in homes and businesses and industries. Most wastewater that DEQ regulates actually comes from domestic uses within our home, rather than wastewater coming from corporations or industries. Another big program is the Chesapeake Bay, with 64,000 square mile watershed that extends into Virginia, Maryland, West Virginia, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York, and Washington, D.C. The Chesapeake Bay is the largest estuary in the United States. DEQ's Chesapeake Bay office works with other state agencies, local governments, and the public to advance the goals of the Chesapeake Bay Watershed Agreement. DEQ's Clean Water Financing and Assistance Program supports the agency's mission to protect and enhance water quality by providing flexible funding solutions and assistance to localities, organizations, and citizens of the Commonwealth. This program supports DEQ's vision through our commitment to cultivating relationships and creating effective solutions that provide all communities with the funding and assistance they need so that every Virginian has access to clean water. With wetlands and streams, as a part of our larger effort to protect water quality, DEQ is tasked with protecting these wetlands and streams to preserve their beneficial uses. DEQ partners closely with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Virginia Marine Resources Commission to achieve these agency goals. DEQ administers the Virginia Water Protection, or VWP, permit program and associated compliance program through the regulation of surface water withdrawals and non-agricultural impoundments, as well as impacts to surface water, such as land clearing, dredging, filling, excavating, draining, or ditching in open water, streams, and wetlands. So this brings us to the close of the water section, and we'll pause here for more questions that may have come up. So Gwen, are we seeing any more questions in the chat right now?
We sure are. We do have some questions about water. So let me go ahead and the first one is referring back to the previous question about rising temperatures in water and the algal blooms. Are these rising water temperatures due to climate change or unknown?
Well, I guess I've always assumed it is climate change and warmer air temperatures because we do have in-stream water quality standards for temperature. So it's not as if we let a permitted facility discharge high temperature water. I mean, it's something that we are seeing throughout the state. So I'm going to go with climate change. Warming temperatures.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Another question about water. Does DEQ coordinate with contiguous states regarding water quality results? Examples, Kentucky for New River water quality or North Carolina for Nottoway River water quality.
So, well, let's start. We coordinate. There is a requirement in the Clean Water Act for states to share information, to provide draft permits, to have an opportunity to comment on permits, for example, with downstream states. So that's kind of built into how the system works, because obviously a river, for example, isn't going to necessarily contain itself to one state. I know that when we do the development of water quality standards, we will reach out to contiguous states. I can remember a situation where Tennessee commented on a proposed water quality standard. So there is definitely those conversations, that give and take. It's more in those regulatory contexts, though, than in-stream water quality data. However, there are huge national data systems where all of the states put all their water quality monitoring in. It used to be called STORET. I don't know if it's been modernized, but all that data is available for all states to use and look at. And there's often a lot of contact and communication among the states.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Melanie. Another question, are there any programs in place to monitor or limit the lawn chemical runoff from golf courses?
Not unless it is collected and discharged, from a pipe. The Clean Water Act and the State Water Control Law do not regulate non-point source pollution, which is not pollution that's channelized through a pipe or a discharge point.
Okay. So the next question, we have actually someone who has asked a couple of questions about karst specifically. So it looks like there's general questions about when surface water and groundwater are mixing. What kind of programs do we have specifically to monitor adverse impacts in karst regions or to address events that may cause some some contamination in surface water that could potentially get into groundwater?
One of the things that is interesting about karst is that there is actually a body of expertise related to karst and caves and all of that, all of those geological features that rests with our sister agency, the Department of Conservation and Recreation. The other thing too that's interesting to note is that when we talk about groundwater management areas, which is primarily for quantity, that applies to designated groundwater management areas, which are in the eastern part of the state, which is what's called the coastal plain. I guess one of the things that I have observed is that we do rely on DCR to be the lead in understanding karst. We have one or two geologists in our office up in Harrisonburg who also have karst expertise that often work with the folks at DCR. But the use of groundwater, like on a residential, a single home basis, is outside of the regulatory authority of either DEQ or DCR. So what we do with our karst work is we try and gather as much data as we can about pathways. A lot of times DCR engages in karst studies to try and figure out, you know, if Thinking Creek, for example, there's a karst feature where a spring will disappear, it'll go into a stream, and they'll try and study and understand what those flow patterns are.
All right. Melanie, thank you so much. I'm going to ask one more question and then we will move on. What role does DEQ have in measuring PFAS and microplastics in freshwater, groundwater, streams, rivers, and coastal areas? And if you could start by defining PFAS for those who are not familiar.
Wow. Well, I cannot give you a acceptably scientific definition of PFAS. But PFAS, PFOA, PFOS, they are a suite of manufactured chemicals that in recent years have been identified by EPA as causing human health impacts. A lot of times when I'm talking about what is PFAS, if somebody doesn't know what it is, it's the material in your Teflon nonstick pan that keeps food from sticking. It is material that is used in chemical firefighting foam. They're very heat resistant. It is often like if you have a fast food sandwich that's in a wrapper. It's a paper wrapper, but you notice inside that it's a little bit slick. So, you know, any liquid or from that sandwich isn't seeping through the paper, that's probably a PFAS type chemical. Because of the uses, they are also called forever chemicals, which means that they're difficult to get rid of, they're difficult to break down. The General Assembly actually passed legislation during this past year where DEQ was given funding to hire 3 positions to start looking at the connection between PFAS and water treatment plants. The way the legislation works is that there's a responsibility that's been assigned to VDH to kind of do some monitoring. And then if PFAS chemicals are found, it kind of comes back to DEQ to do sort of the research about what we know about facilities and discharges and what could be contributing to that problem. But nationally, it is a really, really difficult issue because it took EPA several years to even develop limits for what, you know, how much PFAS can you have, what is a level that is potentially affecting human health, what is a level that, you know, we should adopt as a water quality standard. And the science, EPA has really struggled with the science, to keep up with the science, to start moving forward in those policy and regulatory decisions. So We actually have a couple situations in Virginia where we do know there have been PFAS incidents. And in that case, there's one, for example, out by the airport in Richmond. There was an Air National Guard facility there, and the thought is that, you know, the use of the firefighting foam before anybody knew it had these chemicals in it has gotten into the groundwater. We've worked with the county. We've done a lot of residential groundwater monitoring. We are collecting a lot of in-stream data on the Chickahominy watershed. We actually have, Gwen, if you want to put it in there, we have storyboards on our website about these ongoing PFAS projects. But it's one of those things that we realize EPA said this is a problem, and now we're kind of catching up with what do we do to regulate it, and then ultimately how do we destruct those chemicals. And I think that it's fair to say that so far we really don't know the best way to break them down. What I've heard is, you know, very, very high heat incineration. But then the question is, well, you know, is it possible that then results in air emissions? So PFAS it's an emerging issue, and it's very, very challenging.
Yeah, it really is. Melanie, thank you so much for that answer. So we are at 7:40, and we still have a lot of program to get through. So we are going to go ahead and turn it back over to Kate. And I think that we have an additional questions pause built in, but I think we're going to hold the rest of the questions until the end and hopefully get through the presentation and then have time for a few more questions at the end.
Okay, that sounds like a great plan moving forward. So with that, we'll move on to land protection and revitalization. Through various programs, the Land and Waste Division protects human health, land, and groundwater resources by proactively regulating solid and hazardous waste management. This division addresses historic contamination of sites through the cleanup of contaminated soil and groundwater. DEQ also ensures compliance with petroleum storage tank regulations, oversees cleanup, and administers reimbursement funds for petroleum tanks, and works to promote awareness and strengthen the state's recycling network, as well as works with localities, litter prevention program managers, and with environmental groups on litter prevention programs. DEQ protects and enhances Virginia's land as well as the water underneath by overseeing and providing both technical and financial assistance for cleanup and redevelopment projects, the remediation of contaminated sites such as brownfield revitalization, and overseeing the cleanup of fuel tank leaks. In this photo, staff from DEQ's tanks program they're visiting a former gas station to observe the installation of what's known as passive diffusion bags. These bags have activated carbon in them to prevent petroleum contaminated groundwater from reaching a nearby stream. DEQ also issues permits for landfills with specific requirements based on the type of waste handled at the facility. This permitting process ensures that permittees are held to the requirements established by the Virginia Waste Management Act and the Solid Waste Management Regulations. If you're interested in learning more about DEQ's land programs, be sure to indicate that on our survey for DEQ's 2025 Educational Series webinars. We have a suggestion in there. You can put it right in and we'll follow up on that in the next year. DEQ also administers several programs designed to ensure that the cleanup of contaminated land in Virginia achieves a satisfactory level of human health and environmental protection. All of DEQ's remediation programs use risk assessment to determine whether cleanup is necessary. And two of those programs that we'll highlight fall under the Office of Remediation Programs, ORP. They are the Voluntary Remediation Program, which is VRP, and that provides a mechanism for site owners or operators to voluntarily address contamination. Similarly, we talked very briefly about the Brownfields program. This program encourages the productive use of idled, underutilized, contaminated, or abandoned industrial or commercial properties. And DEQ also works in partnership with the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, on programs that involve the investigation and cleanup of releases from hazardous waste facilities that pose an unacceptable risk, the cleanup or contamination of military installations and formerly used defense sites, and identifying and addressing serious hazardous waste that were abandoned, or perhaps the owner or operator has become bankrupt, as well as promoting the outreach for development of local emergency preparedness programs to respond to chemical releases and many more. So right now we're going to take a minute just to talk about brownfields specifically to showcase 2 of DEQ's online tools that are available to the public. A little bit of background, brownfields, again, these are the properties in which redevelopment or reuse is complicated by the presence of hazardous material, pollution, or contaminants. There are thousands of brownfield redevelopment opportunities across Virginia, including over 100,000 acres of previously mined lands. This slide shows the Brownfields Interactive Story Map. It gives a visual summary of the various brownfield redevelopment projects that DEQ has successfully carried out in the Commonwealth. DEQ also has a Virginia Brownfields Dashboard, which was developed in collaboration with Virginia Energy and shows potential brownfield sites in Virginia. If you're interested in learning more about the Brownfields Dashboard, as well as DEQ's other online public-facing tools, you can register for the DEQ Electronic Tools and Resources webinar, which will be held on October 22nd. And that webinar will provide an overview of our digital tools, including Geographic Information Systems, GIS tools, story maps, and our award-winning Permitting Enhancement and Evaluation platform, that's PEEP. The link's been dropped in the chat for anyone interested in that upcoming webinar. We do have a pause here for questions, but I think, as mentioned before, we're going to plow through this one and go to the next slide, which is a poll, so still an opportunity for involvement. So at this point in time, we've discussed the media-specific actions and activities that DEQ is involved in, but that cover air and water and land. But what types of cross-media programs do you think DEQ has? This would be a program that spans across multiple media. If you want to put that in the chat, we mentioned them briefly earlier in the presentation. If your memory can take you back to many, many slides ago. But we're just kind of asking, what are those cross-media programs you think DEQ is involved in?
There's a juicy question, Kate. So what do you guys, what do you folks think? What programs would cross all the media, air, land, and water? What sort of programs do you think? Well, you're right, Kate. They did mention the couple at the very beginning when we talked about what programs we take care of. A number of people actually mentioned one. Hazmat, interesting. What other sort of DEQ programs would cover across all 3 media? What's involved in all 3 media? I think we might have stumped them here with some cross-media.
Fair enough, and we realize it is the evening, and so your mind may be fried from the day. So yeah, we'll go on to the next slide and we'll talk about these programs. So we have several programs that cross all the media and address both policy and process issues. Some of them include pollution response, enforcement, environmental enhancement, environmental justice, communications, process improvement, and policy. And we'll take a look in depth at some of these programs on the following slides. So DEQ's Pollution Response Program, also known as PREP, responds to pollution incidents that may impact air, land, and water to protect human health and the environment. In these photos we can see on your left, there's staff addressing an illegal dump. The middle photo depicts an illegally dumped chemicals in the barrels that you see that staff had to remove in order to prevent them from impacting wetlands and stream that were close by. And on the right-hand side, you'll see that DEQ also oversees the containment and cleanup of a site that, at this particular site, approximately 15,000 gallons of gasoline were leaked from an underground storage tank. As a result, 4,000 gallons of that gasoline leaked into a nearby creek and also a sanitary sewer line. As a member of the public, you can report pollution incidents to DEQ through PREP or by calling DEQ's offices directly, like we discussed earlier. And again, if there is an imminent threat, please call 911 as well, and call them first. And a recent PREP success story that we wanted to mention, some of you all may have heard about this. It was the South Hill warehouse fire. This happened in Mecklenburg County, down on the border of Virginia and North Carolina. On July 6th of this year, a car actually hit 2 propane tanks that ignited a fire inside of an agricultural chemical building that quickly collapsed. DEQ was able to work with local, state, and federal agencies to minimize, assess, and protect impacts to air and water quality through monitoring and also providing the data to other entities to inform their swimming and fish advisories. Now we'll move on to accountability and enforcement. The path to enforcement is a multi-step process with tiered actions. The agency does hold violators accountable. However, DEQ does not immediately issue penalties. Instead, the agency provides multiple opportunities, including issuing notices of violation and consent orders to help violators return to compliance prior to issuing more severe corrective actions. DEQ even offers technical assistance and training to help violators self-correct their actions, as it can be difficult for facilities and especially small businesses to keep up to date with all the environmental laws and regulations. The goal of getting violators into compliance is to prevent further environmental harm. The use of enforcement tools is implemented on an as-needed basis, and fines and legal proceedings are not the primary focus. DEQ offers compliance assistance to ensure that everyone understands their responsibilities to comply with environmental laws and regulations. When that doesn't work, enforcement staff does work to enforce compliance, and that is through penalties, which are designed to correct environmental issues caused by non-compliance and also to hopefully deter future non-compliance. You can search our enforcement cases on my DEQ portal, and a link to my DEQ portal is available in the chat. Moving on to policy. There are 3 regulatory boards composed of Virginia citizens appointed by the governor. They're responsible for adopting many of Virginia's environmental regulations. DEQ administers the regulations as approved by the boards. Those boards are the State Air Pollution Control Board, the State Water Control Board, and the Virginia Waste Management Board. The boards have statutory authority to communicate regulations, and before publicizing regulations required by environmental statutes, the boards do seek information from the public, the regulated community, and advisory committees. Policy staff serve as legislative liaisons between DEQ and the General Assembly, and they are able to assist members of the General Assembly in seeking DEQ solutions to the problems of citizens of the Commonwealth. Policy decisions follow the direction of the administration. And then we also have the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, which provides everyone with access to public records upon request. DEQ has multiple programs that are focused on enhancing the environment. The agency's Pollution Prevention, or P2 program, is dedicated to minimizing the creation of pollution and stopping pollution even before it's created and then has to be recycled or otherwise disposed of. P2 initiatives include the Virginia Environmental Excellence Program, VEEP, Virginia Green, and the Governor's Environmental Excellence Awards. We'll be hosting a webinar dedicated to pollution and prevention in December, and we'll also put that link into the chat in case you're interested in registering. Environmental impact. DEQ is the state lead for the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, reviews. These are conducted for federal projects or programs, and DEQ coordinates the reviews of major state projects as well. It's some things such as airports and power generating facilities. For our Coastal Zone Management Program, DEQ is the lead agency in a network of Virginia state agencies and local governments focused on projects and initiatives for the coastal zones east of I-95. DEQ receives funding from NOAA, much of which is given out to other agencies to implement projects. Some current areas of focus for the coastal zone management include conserving sensitive coastal lands, reducing marine debris, increasing the use of Virginia native plants, restoring Virginia's native oysters and encouraging oyster gardening. And as of August 27th, the Coastal Zone Management team is gathering feedback to develop Virginia's ocean plan. The staff is going to have their own separate webinar about this on September 5th if you're interested, and we can put that link in the chat for you as well. Engaging with communities. So the Office of Environmental Justice will be attending events around the state with information about DEQ, and we're happy to come and provide workshops on topics of interest for you and your community. You can get information from DEQ about upcoming meetings, public notices, citizen boards, live streaming board meetings as well. And funding. So DEQ administers various types of funding, both state and federal, and that are available to different types of recipients. The Virginia Petroleum Storage Tank Fund, this is a reimbursement program that assists with the cost of cleaning up the environment when a release happens from an eligible tank. These funds can be awarded to individual tank owners, both businesses and residential. Some of our grants are available to community-based organizations and localities, such as the Citizen Water Monitoring Grant, which supports volunteer monitoring of water quality throughout the Commonwealth. The Clean Water Finance and Assistance Program, this administers 4 funding programs with loans and grants available to localities through that cover stormwater, wastewater, and other clean water projects. DEQ also administers an annual litter prevention grants to localities. And for the 2024 grant year, we had more than $200,000 that was awarded to 22 localities in the competitive litter grants program, and more than $3 million that was distributed among 177 applicants for the non-competitive grants and expanded polystyrene campaign activities. The Coastal Zone Management Program that we just talked about, they also administer annual grants to coastal communities. The current focal area for their grant program is coastal resiliency to help meet the goals of the Virginia Coastal Resilience Master Plan. And finally, we mentioned this before, but DEQ has been awarded a climate pollution reduction grant. It's $150 million. $50 million of that will go towards DEQ reducing greenhouse gases through carbon sequestration projects on natural and working lands. And the remaining balance is for DEQ and Virginia Energy in a coalition to reduce methane emissions with a focus on projects in coal mines and landfills. And again, this is not even a comprehensive list of all the funding opportunities administered by DEQ. We encourage you to visit DEQ's website, do a general search for grants and loans to see what types of funding may be available. And please feel free to reach out to the OEJ staff if there's any particular grant you're interested in and you're having trouble finding information on that. So here was another questions break, but given the time, I think we're gonna keep moving. And again, if you have questions, we will definitely follow up with you individually. But we just wanna get this information out. Here's how you get involved with DEQ. Citizen science, we have water quality monitoring, air quality monitoring. The air quality monitoring, just as a heads up, that is a community style local air quality monitoring projects that we do there. We do have limited or finite resources with that particular program. We also have public participation, providing comments on or attending public meetings about DEQ permitting and regulations, and also providing input on how DEQ should spend that climate pollution reduction grant that we keep mentioning, $150 million. We need input from everybody on how this should be spent. Funding, we just mentioned several grant opportunities for programs that focus on things like litter prevention, recycling education, and even revitalizing brownfields. Reporting, you can report pollution incidents through PREP and through my DEQ portal. And learning, which is what you're doing right now. You're joining us for this webinar, and DEQ also has several helpful videos available on YouTube. Also, there are federal grants available, and DEQ is happy to get you connected with information on EPA's Community Change Grants or EPA's Thriving Community Grant Making Program. And of course, if you really want to be involved, you can always join the team. So DEQ, we come from all different backgrounds. We have biologists, geologists, engineers, political science people, environmental science obviously is a big pull for us, law and communications. We do have internships available as well as hourly positions. If you're interested, there's a state application that you can find online. Just make sure to highlight your skills and experience that are relevant to the job posting and description. And visit us online. Of course, we'd love for you to find us online. Go to www.deq.virginia.gov, and you can find facts and FAQ sheets, public comment opportunities, environmental data and reports, information on environmental laws and regulations, and you can report pollution incidents as well there. And there's a QR code that you see on this slide. You can use that to sign up for DEQ News. So again, these were the objectives for the webinar this evening. We hope we hit all these for you. Hopefully by now you can describe a DEQ activity that protects the air or the water or the land, and maybe you can name a few ways about how you can get involved in DEQ and how you can stay up to date on involvement opportunities. These, again, we mentioned them several times. We're going to plug them one more time. These are our upcoming webinars. We have one on October 22nd, and that's DEQ Tools and Resources. And then our last one for 2024 will be on December 10th. That'll be pollution prevention. There's also a survey where you can tell us what you're interested in learning about for DEQ as we prepare for the 2025 education series next year. And so there's a QR code right here for that as well. And now we can, oh, there's the survey. All right, QR code's right there if you're interested. And now we can pause for questions if we, I think we have just a few minutes, if there are any questions that we can answer in this time period.
Yes, thank you, Kate. So it looks like we have 3 minutes left. We did have to skip those pauses for questions. but we do appreciate all of the questions that had come in. I really think that the only question that we haven't specifically answered was someone who asked, as a high schooler, how can I get involved with DEQ's mission? So Melanie, I don't know if you have any thoughts about how folks who are maybe not quite ready to apply for a job at DEQ, but want to get involved in improving our environment. Are there things that you can think of that you might recommend for a high schooler?
That's a tough question. We initiated an internship program this past summer, which was for college and grad students. And one of the things that we actually talked about in setting up that program is, what about opportunities for younger folks, for high school folks? What kind of things could we do? And honestly, we thought about it and didn't really come up with some great ideas this year, but it's something that we are going to continue to think about. You know, I know that there might be some opportunities through the environmental education program that I mentioned over at DCR. I also know that there are often clubs and organizations within high schools that might have a focus on a particular field of study, or I don't know, environmental sustainability. And if there are those groups where you go to school, you can always the group can always reach out to us in terms of coming and doing some outreach, you know, maybe speaking to the group. But at this moment in time, there are not a lot of hands-on opportunities, I have to say, for the high school student age range.
Yeah, it can be tricky for sure. But you know what, Lucas? I invite you to reach out to the Office of Environmental Justice staff with that question, and we are always happy to have a conversation about what we know, and maybe organizations or groups that we've been talking to in our regions that we might be able to put you in touch with. So with that, it looks like we are at 8 o'clock, and although there are still a few questions that we did not get to, as we promised, we will be following up with those answers via email individually in the next week or so. So please look ahead for that. I just want to remind you that I did put into the chat a link to an evaluation. There's also a QR code on the screen. If you would just I promise it will only take a couple minutes to tell us how we've done and give us some recommendations for what you liked and what we can do better next time. We would really appreciate that. We hope that you will join us in the future, and thank you very much for spending your evening with us, and I hope that you all have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gwen. Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Melanie, for everything. Appreciate it, and thank you, participants. I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar now. Have a good night. Bye.